friends. By popular demand, I'm bringing to you my bread recipe today. I've been asked to make a video for not just what's in the bread, but also how to make it, because there's a plague on and people are doing carbs again. So for this recipe, you will need 6.5 cups of flour, a tablespoon of yeast, the kind that comes in a jar, not the kind that comes in a little packet, a tablespoon of salt, a large clean bowl with something to cover it, a wooden spoon for stirring, 2 bread loaf pans, and in your oven, a metal dish that you can pour water into. So, let's get started. The first thing you do is you take your flour tote. No? It's not a thing? I don't have flour tote? So the first thing you do is take your completely normal sized container of flour and scoop out 6.5 cups. When you do this, it's important to not pack the flour down into the cup. You want it to be nice and loose. Shake it down. Make sure you got a full cup, but really just sort of shake it, don't pack it in there, and scoop in all 6.5 cups. Mine was pre-measured. Now, figure out where you put your tablespoon measurer. Find it. Don't panic. There's no need to panic. All right. I just had it. Greta? Okay. Now that you've found your tablespoon measurer, you're going to measure out a tablespoon of yeast. And in it goes. The next thing is the tablespoon of salt. That can be a heaping tablespoon. The recipe originally called for 2 tablespoons of salt, but I find that much too salty for my taste. You're gonna take your wooden spoon and you're gonna really just stir that all up. Stir it in there. And then we're gonna add the ingredient that I forgot to tell you about, which is water, which I'm really hoping that you have in your house. So, get your measuring cup and you lean over to the sink. And you want baby bath water. You want it to be, you do the baby bath water test on your wrist. You want it to be warm on your wrist, not hot, not cold, especially in this weather, because it will take forever to rise. Okay. So start with 2 cups, warmish water, and then 1 more cup of warmish water. That means 3. That's 3 cups of warmish water, by the way, if you needed a little support in that area, which I apparently did. Okay, we have got 3 cups of warmish water in our bowl, and now really stir it up, really vent that frustration, really just that's fine. And if flour goes places, that's fine. Nobody's gonna see you. All right, so stir it in, and I'll let you see what I'm doing. Stir it in. Get your hair out of the bowl. It's disgusting. By folding it over. You're folding it over with your spoon. You need a pretty sturdy spoon to do this. Folding it over until there's no more dry flour at the bottom. So it should form a shaggy ball. Shaggy, sticky, doughy ball. Scrape off the sides. There you go. Scrape the dough off your wooden spoon. And take your dough and put it in a warm place, cover it, and put it in a warm place to rise, out of reach of any pets. Raw bread dough is toxic to all pets in multiple ways. Do not let your pets near the dough. Which means that I have to put it in my locked car. let's go do that. The next step is to let your bread dough rise for 2 hours. Don't do any longer than that because that can overproof your bread. It can collapse. It can also turn gray for reasons that I don't understand, but we don't like it. So that's a great time for you to just sort of relax, contemplate your mortality, and, let the yeast do its work. Okay, so it's been 2 hours, and by now you're probably regretting the 3-hour time commitment that I didn't tell you that this process took, but that's okay. Hang in there, because you're going to have bread in like 20, you're going to have bread in like a math number of minutes. So, your dough should look like this, okay? It's like bubbly and stuff. All right, so what you need to do is get like a fistful of flour. Like, go to your flour tote or reasonably sized container of flour and get like this much flour, and you're gonna splop it on top of your dough. This next part is the only hard part. It's the only part that you really need the video for. It's called wrapping the gluten cloak. But first, preheat your oven to 450 degrees and lightly grease your baking pans using olive oil on a paper towel. So let's go do that. All right, a little bit of olive oil on a paper towel. Take your baking pans and rub that olive oil in. Make sure when you're preheating your oven that your metal plate is already in the oven. Remember the metal plate we talked about that you're going to pour some water into? So you have to have 2 racks in your oven. You got to have the bottom rack with the metal plate, and then the next rack up, like the middle rack, for the actual bread to go on. Oh, I'm so tired. Okay. We're ready to go get that fistful of flour. So you take your handful of flour and you just plop it over the top of the bread like that. And you spread it out nice and thin. All right, so now it's important when you're wrapping the gluten cloak to work very, very quickly and to handle the dough as a little as possible. So I'm very, very quickly going to put my fingers down the sides of the bowl, and then I'm going to separate the dough into 2 equal portions. So I'm working very, very quickly, but also very gently. I'm trying to just touch the bread that's on the side. And then when I get the whole thing separated from the bowl, I'm going to pick it up. It's going to start separating itself. I have a sharp knife here to help with that process. And then taking this part, I'm going to wrap the gluten cloak, which means I'm going to tuck the edges under. I'm going to roll it in my hands, and then it's going to go straight into this baking pan. All right, so you get to see another example of that really quick. Here's another loaf that needs its gluten cloak wrapped. Just tossing it until it's all tucked under, and it's going straight into this pan. I'm going to dust the tops with some of the leftover flour. Dust this top with some leftover flour. And now I'm going to put them on my preheating oven for a second rising. Just another reminder that bread dough is toxic to animals, and they cannot have it under any circumstances. If your dog consumes bread dough while it is rising, you need to go to the emergency vet right away. And if you happen to own a dog that can open doors, you need to be really careful about where you're keeping that dough. Okay, we're almost there. Take your 2 loaves of bread. They should look like this. Okay? You're going to take a sharp knife. And you're going to score the tops. That means you're going to make a couple of quick cuts. If you're in deep pans like this one, you're going to cut the long way. If you're doing it in like a cute little round thing that I didn't show you how to do, then you're going to do it however you want. I don't know, live your best life, whatever. So, quick cuts in the top of the bread, make them nice and deep. This is going to help the bread as it expands and releases its moisture. It's going to make it less likely to crack. I don't like it when my bread loaves crack at the bottom. That's not a problem you have. Don't worry about it. Just enjoy the bread. So I'm going to score both of my bread loaves. Some really deep scores here. I don't know if you can see that. These are my scored bread loaves. See that? Scored right there, scored right there. And it's time to put them in the oven. So I'm gonna put them both in the oven, but before I do that, I'm gonna find my measuring cup again. Measuring cup right here. And I'm gonna fill it with 2 cups of water. Now you're only gonna need to pour out 1 cup, but fill your measuring cup with 2 cups because it's easier to pour out the first cup than it is to pour out the second cup. So we're gonna put these 2 loaves in the oven fairly quickly. Then we're gonna dart back here for this cup of water. We're gonna pour this cup of water into the pan that's in our bottom rack of the oven. We're gonna do this really fast and with our face away from the oven. So you gotta sort of aim and pour and keep your face away because steam burns and we don't want that. Ready? Go! Now you're gonna set your timer for 30 minutes. The bread's supposed to cook for 35 minutes. I like to check it after 30 to make sure my oven doesn't have a hot spot so that I can turn the loaves if I need to. So that's like, you know, an episode of Community or Parks and Rec or whatever. Just go chill out for that amount of time. Almost done. Okay, well done. You've done it. You've made it. Your bread is out of the oven and it is done. So your bread loaves should look like this. And to check to see if your bread loaf is done, and I know this sounds very silly, but it's actually real. If you want to know if your loaf is done, listen very carefully and it should crackle. Ah, nice crackles. So, the bread is done. Do not cut into your bread until it is fully cool, otherwise it will collapse and be a weird soggy mess. And do not saran wrap or otherwise enclose in Tupperware your loaf of bread for the first 24 hours, or it will become again quite soggy and will mold very quickly. Otherwise it will last, if you let it sit out for 24 hours, it will last a very long time. Again, beware of your dog. So I'm gonna take this, and I advise that you do too, onto my grate for cooling things down, and I'm going to take this off to my bread cooling room. No? People don't have bread cooling rooms? Peasants.